we're overwhelmed with information. We're overwhelmed by things like social media and any other kind of distracting thing you can imagine, which I think pulls us further away from that grounded center that we are humans, and by definition, we are caregiving beings. But I think a lot of us, including me, especially in big corporate America, we lose that.
What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today, because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others.
Are you interested in having Rick speak at your event or business? Here is what others have to say.
Did not know his story, and it was so inspirational, and his presence on stage, his authenticity was just incredible.
I absolutely loved his performance. It made me feel some type of way.
If you're looking for a speaker for your next event, hire Rick. I promise you this, you will not be disappointed.
Visit rickornelas.com to book him today.
Welcome back, Impact Heroes. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to our latest iSpark Chain social impact hero, and he is a good one. Our guest today is committed to ridding the corporate world of its toxic ways by developing authentic and courageous leaders who have a passion for cultivating a better we-oriented work life. He believes we should do the right thing, always, and lead by example, do what you say you're going to do, and taking action. Amen to those, by the way. He knows we can improve things by owning our mistakes, picking each other up, and measuring ourselves by outcomes, not activity. That's some powerful stuff right there. Remember those. He believes in the power of challenge for ourselves and others, and don't we need more of that for sure in today's world. He's someone who understands his purpose on earth and wants to leave a lasting legacy. We will definitely dive deeper into what that looks like on the show. He is a USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Bam, double whammy. So please welcome inspirational speaker and leadership expert, the dynamic, committed, and caring Kyle McDowell. Kyle, welcome to the iSpark Change podcast.
Hey, Rick, man, I am excited to be here. And what a great introduction. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, you're so welcome. And just know that I was just sharing, what you created and for yourself and your life. So, it's your story. But I do appreciate that. Yeah. So I'm excited to dive into the podcast today because, we've had some impact heroes that focus on the leadership space, as you do. Mm-hmm. And leadership is near and dear to my heart because I came out of the corporate world. I was in the corporate world for about 20 years, and everything was always leadership. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of, I think back to like my early days when I went to, leadership seminars, and there was people like Jim Rohn or, some of these Zig Ziglar or Stephen Covey, I saw these guys speak and they're all talking about leadership and so it was super important for me, right? And I would undergo all this training and everything. And then as I've evolved and became a coach and founded iSpark Change, I've seen that leadership is a part of everything, really of everything, all facets of life. Yeah. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. I mean, how did you get involved, into leadership? How does your, origin story of leadership start?
Yeah, well, not too dissimilar from yours, man. I was in corporate America for nearly 30 years, 28 years to be exact. And just for some context, I started when I was 18 years old. I had been 18 for about a month when I landed my first gig in corporate America at a small regional bank in Tampa, Florida, as a call center rep, and worked my way through progressively larger roles in terms of scope and the teams that I led. And when I called it a career, or at least the first chapter, the first phase of my career, as I'm kind of coining it nowadays, I had a team of 15,000 people. I had a $2 billion budget. I ran 40 plus locations for the world's largest pharmaceutical company. I also spent a lot of time in 2 other Fortune 10 firms leading similar size organizations. But, you know, what I found, at least during my journey, and now that I'm in the second phase of my career, which is really all about evangelizing the principles that you opened with, it occurred to me, you know, it seemed like with every passing year, I could feel a sense of apathy developing. And it got stronger and stronger. And the apathy was really towards the environments that I was very instrumental in creating, which is kind of ironic. But I had a chance, and as the apathy grew, I guess it was around 2015 or so, I just became very disenfranchised with corporate America. And at the time I told myself, if I ever got an opportunity to lead an organization exactly the way that I wanted to lead it, without fear of not fitting in, without fear of being kind of ostracized for not drinking the corporate Kool-Aid the way that I had the previous 20 plus years, I was going to do it. And, you know, Rick, it turned out to be one of those be careful what you wish for moments, because I was offered a role, take on a company or take on a program within a multi-billion-dollar company that in total was about $700 million a year, 15,000 employees. And the hiring manager, the fellow that brought me on, had warned me that there was some toxicity and some kind of dysfunction that I would need to address. And I thought, this is perfect. This is my chance to do it differently. Because like you, I was thrown into so many leadership seminars. I would have, you know, I participated in countless conferences where the latest guru would come out and speak the latest kind of buzzword bingo and how to be a better leader. But I told myself, if I had this chance, I was going to lead in a way that was more authentic and vulnerable than anything I'd ever seen. But I needed a rallying cry. So the night before I was going to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of that new program, I was about 90 days into the role at that time. I sat in my hotel room and I thought, you know, okay, this is your chance, but what are you going to do? Like, what's going to be so different about what you've done and seen in the past and versus what they've seen in the past? So with no pre-planning and my laptop in my lap, I still had that day's suit on, as a matter of fact. I just opened up the laptop and started a PowerPoint. And in a couple hours, I landed with 10 principles, each beginning with the word we. And I'm not super creative, Rick, so I now have the 10 we's. And, you know, a lot happened between then and today, but suffice to say, the birth of those principles, sharing them and evangelizing them as widely as we did across a team of 15,000 people, and watching the transformation at an organizational level, but much more importantly, watching the transformation at a human level, the people that reported directly to me and further into the organization, a profound change in not only how they led, how they treated one another, probably more importantly. And there are a handful of examples of people that have come to me since then to say it's affected and changed how they raise their families and treat their friends as well. So that's when I realized, and I realize this is a very long answer, but when I realized that these principles had such an impact, I felt like it was my obligation to spread the word wider and farther. And that's why I've committed the second half of my career to doing just that. And it is my purpose, man. I believe this is exactly why I'm here, is to help people find their paths on their career journeys, become authentic leaders, make a difference, have an impact, and be fulfilled in their work lives. So yeah, that's the long answer of how we got here.
Well, thank you for sharing the story, Kyle, because I think that will resonate with our audience, because many of the people that listen to the show, they're in that second part of their career. They're in that second life or second act, whatever you want to call it. And, their journey has gotten them to the point that they're in, just like yours has, right? And we're all a product of those journeys. And,
right on.
And I like that maybe in a different capacity, you were building individuals or helping develop individuals, but that you've taken it to that next level of, hey, I'm going to impact as many people as I can, and I'm going to reach as many people as I can through my writing and your speaking and everything. So that's the type of thing that, it's part of the reason why we wanted to have you on the show, is because we see those actions as heroic, and what we call a social impact hero, because you're you're spreading positive change. Your actions have a positive effect on humanity. You're by our definition, you're making the world a better place. So I just want to know, with that definition in mind, do you see yourself as a social impact hero?
If I'm being completely honest, no, I don't, because, Rick, I feel like, and you and I were chatting about this just before we went live. I feel like it's an obligation. If I know something that you don't know, or if I can help you in a way that you need help, I think it's my obligation as a human to a fellow human to help them be better than they were yesterday, and help them reach their highest and best potential, whatever that is for each individual. So I think it's an obligation, but I think in our busy lives today, whether it be our work presence or the things that kind of occupy us outside of the workplace, we just lose sight of that, man. We're overwhelmed with information. We're overwhelmed by things like social media and any other kind of distracting thing you can imagine, which I think pulls us further away from that grounded center that we are humans. And by definition, humans, we are caregiving beings. But I think a lot of us, including me, especially in big corporate America, we lose that. And I'm disappointed that it took me 20 plus years to get there. I really appreciate the way that you coin it. I don't look at it that way, because I just think it's an obligation.
Yeah, and I'd say you're not alone to say no, because of all the guests we've had on the show, I'd say about maybe 75, 80% of people say no. And then usually I have them convinced by the end of the episode, that they are a hero. But so I'll take that challenge once again. But and what I mean by that is the fact that you see it as an obligation. I see that as further exemplifying being a social impact hero, because you're not doing it for the glory. You're not doing it for the accolades. You're not doing it, for, some kind of fanfare, but you're doing it because you believe it's the right thing to do. And it's part of your purpose, as you talked about.
Right on.
And that's where I think that a lot of people, and this is how I felt for many years, don't believe that they can do something quote unquote heroic. They don't believe that they can have a large impact on others, because we feel we're too small. We feel that my voice is going to make a difference. How can I reach so many people? All those type of things, all those limiting beliefs that we may tell ourselves. And so the fact that you've taken that next step and said, okay, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to speak, I'm going to, get these principles out there because I see value in them, and I see that they can help others become heroic or help others to be more impactful. That in itself exemplifies you as a hero, by my definition. So, I understand how you saw something in that, right? When you're in corporate, you're like, hey, I'm going to teach these to everybody. And I think there's going to be some value. Mm-hmm. When did you decide to, because I think this is an important part of your story, especially for people that are in that place that you were and I was, and saying, hey, what's going to be the shift? What was that shift point, that impetus where you said, okay, I'm leaving that, I'm moving on to this next phase of life? Like, what sparked that?
Ironically, it was the very group of people that were the first to embrace the principles, embrace the 10 We's. So I left the organization that I created, the We's, is a company called Maximus, and I left there to join the pharmaceutical company that I mentioned. And I was there about a year when my sense of just unhappiness. Like I just had this moment where I felt like there's more to this life than what I'm living today. And it's probably worth mentioning. You talked about overcoming challenges earlier. Within a 6-month period, I made the decision to leave corporate America. COVID had been around for only a few months at that time. I'd gotten it twice. And, in the middle of all of that, I'll share it with you. The son that I was raising, at around 2 years old, I learned he was not mine. So incredible series of months for me. Which obviously present their own set of challenges. In isolation, they would, but altogether made it incredibly challenging time for me. And I reached the conclusion that my time at that role inside of corporate America was over. So then I had the choice. I was at a crossroad. Do I want to go back into corporate America, leading, a similar size organization, get the great compensation, feed the ego with all these, this mountain, this just kind of mountain of a team that stands behind me? Or do I have I had a gut check moment to say, if you really believe in these principles and you think you have a chance to have a greater impact than you've ever had, then you might want to do something about that. So I flirted with the idea of writing a book. And the people that first embraced the principles at Maximus knew I had left the pharmaceutical company, and I started to get phone calls from them. And it was not very, they weren't coy. The calls would go like, have you started the book yet? Or when are you going to start the book? You have to do this, right? And then as I had those imposter syndrome moments throughout the year and a half that it took to write the book, it was this very same group of people that would encourage me, kind of kick me in the ass from time to time and say, you got this, keep going, man. So it was a combination of those events, but the strongest, most compelling magnet and all of that pull was my former colleagues. Rick, I left that company for almost 5 years ago, and there are still a handful of people from that team that I have regularly scheduled one-on-ones with, because they value my leadership input. I value theirs. And I don't know about you, buddy, but I've not stayed in touch to that degree with anyone throughout my career other than this core group of people. I just had dinner with them last week. And again, I haven't worked with them in 4 years, 5 years. It's really, it's humbling. It's very cool to hear.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I appreciate you sharing that and going to the depth that you did. And I want to touch on 2 points of what you shared. And the bigger point is what you were just talking about, is that how those lives touch you and you touch those lives and you continue to have an impact on those. So I want to dive into there, but I don't think we should continue without amplifying what you were talking about, that you were going through a lot of things, right? You were going through some deep and challenging times. Dark times. Yeah. Dark times, if you will. Yeah, sure. Of course. And so Kyle, so how, a lot of people in that situation would go the other direction, right? They would say, okay, I need to self-preserve. I need to take care of myself. I need to figure out what's going on with me. And maybe that was part of your journey, but how did you take, going through those dark times and turn it into, okay, this is going to, and there's some similarities in what happened with myself when I wrote my book during 2020, same things, but how did you take that experience and turn it into, okay, I'm going to, make lemonade out of lemons, so to speak, or, turn this into a good situation? Yeah. The principles. So when I made the decision to lead by these principles, the 10 W's, somehow with no intention, man, it ended up transcending into my personal life, to the point where if I behave in a certain way, or you see me carry myself inside the workplace, I felt as if I would be a hypocrite, if someone were to catch me outside of the workplace behaving in a way not consistent with those same principles. Now, don't be naive. I'm not an angel, but my point is if I am going to be the leader that says, here are the rules by which we will govern each other, you to me and me to you, both directions. I don't believe in any type of leadership gap. We are held to the same set of standards. If I was going to behave according to those principles or in line with those principles, then outside of work, I felt I must live that same way. And where this ultimately leads to is, I've found even in my darkest days, I was still the guy that a lot of people would reach out to for help. And I love that. I love helping people become something or get through things, whatever the scenario is.
but I value my authenticity so much and never, ever want to be called a hypocrite that if I were to live that way inside of work, not be that way outside of work, and then kind of shrivel and not help people the way that I enjoyed helping people for so long and take their help to get through this process, I'd be a hypocrite. So I think, and there's a life lesson in here that's deeper than any kind of leadership book or guru or expert that I think is really important. And that's when we're overt about setting our foundation, and I say the word principles a lot because a principle is, by definition, it's a fundamental truth. It's something we hold to be true. It's our system of beliefs. When we subscribe to them in the workplace or out of the workplace, you almost have an accountability contract with yourself. And I never wanted to disappoint you or anyone else. So I certainly shouldn't be okay with disappointing myself. So when I created that contract with myself and said, I will live these principles every single day because I won't be a hypocrite, because that's what I'd seen so much of in corporate America, it made its way to my personal life. And then when at my darkest time, I again felt like I would be less than authentic and be a hypocrite if I went into this woe is me world where everyone around me has seen me as someone that they lean on. In other words, like, practice what you preach. And then just leaning on people that I'm married to her now. I found just a partner that was really, really supportive throughout all those bumps, which does nothing but inspires me to do more of what she did for me, which I think is so contagious that we need to do more of for each other.
Yeah. I love what you shared because it speaks to, as you said, the power and the value of authenticity to you, right? Your authenticity in practicing what you preach. Because I feel, and, a lot of the leadership gurus would probably agree with me, that that's the number one trait that a leader can have, right? Is to be authentic. It's what worked for, people like Gandhi or Oprah or MLK, or, they're completely authentic and true to who they are. And so what I think says a lot about your heroic nature, Kyle, is that because, so we look at HERO as an acronym, and the H is to, honor your purpose. And you were doing exactly that. You hadn't even written this out in book form, right? You hadn't written it out in book form. Right. So it wasn't out there in the mainstream. It wasn't like you're like, okay, I wrote a book on these we's, and so someone's going to see me out in public and they're going to say, it was just inside, right? Maybe there's your select group of your, friends or colleagues or, what have you to hold you accountable. But that speaks to the power of that authenticity and staying true to yourself and honoring that purpose.
Well said.
That made you, and I think, took you to that next level. Because if you had gone the other way, which, like I said, a lot of people could, a lot of people could in that situation, and no one would just, discount them for doing so. Yeah. They would go into that situation and say, well, I need to, do this or do that. Then you might not be where you are now.
Facts.
You might not have written your book and been helping that many more people. So that's a credit to you. So I do want to go back, Kyle, to that accountability piece, because part of, I agree with you. I believe leadership is a multi-directional, thing, that it's not just one way, like top down, like it used to be back in the, militaristic days of yesteryear, right? That it's just what we say goes. And, many of us that are, around our age, that's what the gurus were preaching when we first started in our careers, right? And that's what the companies were teaching us. And so we've had to grow into these authentic, empathetic, emotionally intelligent and leaders, of today, that we are today. So share with how that accountability piece, how that mentoring piece, or how that, co-leadership, how that, kept you going, and the role that's played, not just in the writing in your book, but how, even to this day, you said, right, the support that you still, that you're, and I have similar colleagues like that we have regular calls or, have lunch, same type of thing. Not as many as you shared, but there definitely are some. And so share how that, helps you on a regular basis, stay true to who you are?
Yeah, man. It's if you so backing up to the story that I opened with about, be careful what you wish for. I wanted to lead differently. I wanted to have a team that was more of a team than I had ever seen. I wanted to be the leader that I never had. And I had a couple of good ones, but I had many, many more bad ones. More focused on their own personal success, focused on their own growth. And almost viewed me, although I had, huge organizations throughout most of my career, viewed me as a distraction. And I see the role as a leader as nothing but, it's so far from the way that most people lead that it's almost funny to me. I think leaders have two responsibilities. The first is to remove all the barriers that stand in the way of your team achieving excellence at the individual level for members of the team, as well as the macro, the team combined, the royal we. That's job one. Get those barriers out of the system, because the more they have to focus on those barriers and the more they stare at those barriers, the less likely they are to have full commitment towards the role and the tasks that come with the role. And then the second component is so tightly related, and it is motivate, inspire, encourage, cheer, in spite of the barriers that remain. Because, as well as I do, Rick, we're never going to remove all of the barriers that stand in the way of greatness. Because nothing worth having is easy. So there will be, by definition, there will be barriers. But inspiring people to go beyond that, in spite of the barriers, is where the real value comes from leadership. So for me, when I made the decision to lead in a way that I had never been led and lead this organization in a way that I had never seen or done, that meant I had to drop my ego. I had to shift from focusing, and I think I did this for many years, focusing on being right instead of focusing on what was right. And I was purposeful to include two of the we's that I knew could be really problematic for some people, including me. And it would be the gut check that would kind of assess whether or not I was living the principles. And those two that stand out are, number 8, we challenge each other, and number 9, we embrace challenge. And how applicable that is to this conversation, or this point of our conversation, it goes like this. So if I'm the guy evangelizing these principles, we're going to do the right thing, we're going to lead by example, 1 to 10. And the first time I get pushback from someone on the team, and this happened early on in my journey with the principles, if I take that feedback and I react adversely to it, I'm not embracing challenge, which is one of the principles I just finished evangelizing to you guys. So then if they come back with a challenge and say, Kyle, that doesn't work for us, or this doesn't work for us, whatever the scenario is, I am now obliged. I must hear them out. Otherwise, again, I'm a hypocrite. So I feel for me, it was less about getting the team to rally around these principles, which came secondarily, and more about them seeing me live the principles every single day without fail. There's a story I tell in the book that as it relates to embracing challenges, one of my direct reports was just difficult, man. She was difficult at every turn. And to this day, she would admit that. We're great friends now. She would admit she was difficult for the sake of being difficult. She just felt like she needed to challenge me to prove myself. She didn't know why. She's a great leader now, by the way. She's overcome a lot of challenges. And I knew, for example, when I remember asking her for an Excel workbook, send me that workbook. I want to take a look at. She sent me a screenshot of a tab, and I was like, Julia, I can't use a screenshot of Excel. I need to see the cells. I got to see the formulas. So it was just an example of her being difficult just for the sake of being difficult. But I knew I was being watched. And if I had led with those principles and pounded my fist on the desk and, took this on the boss approach, everything's DOA at that point. Which also is why the very first principle is we do the right thing always, because if we can't agree to that, and we can disagree on what the right thing is, but we're going to focus on doing the right thing, even if it costs more, if it takes longer, if it's tougher, we're going to do the right thing. Every principle after that, we're in a house of cards if we can't agree to that first one. So I felt like leading the way by evangelizing the principles and then living them every single day made me be accountable to them, or else I'm a hypocrite, and I just hate that word. And the authenticity that I saw so lacking throughout my journey at big companies that I needed to turn on that authenticity more than ever to get their buy-in and followership.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did, because we wouldn't be talking here if you didn't. So you mentioned challenge, embracing challenge, and challenging each other, and doing the right thing always. Do you have a favorite we? Do you have a favorite one of? I do. Of the 10, yeah. Which one?
We do, and it's not a coincidence that I've already used it. We challenge each other. Yeah, man, we challenge each other because in most environments, and you alluded to it earlier, challenges are reserved for the boss. Mm-hmm. In my world, in a culture of excellence, a culture that thrives on the 10 We's, I can challenge you. I'm obligated to. If I disagree with something, you can challenge me. We peer to peer, every omnidirectional, right? But there are two rules that everyone must agree to if you're going to participate, and that is challenges are always grounded in one of two things, or perhaps both data and experience. I can't just show up and say, Rick, I don't like the flavor of ice cream in the break room today. I must come with data or experience, otherwise it's just complaining. And I'm so adamant that challenges are important because, and we've touched on it already, is anything worth having, any growth, overcoming anything is usually reserved for or from a challenge. And that's why the next one is we embrace challenge. Mm-hmm. And I think the more comfortable leaders can be and being vulnerable and allowing their team to challenge them, because I'm going to challenge the hell out of you, make no mistake, with data and experience. And I would love for you to do the same, because that shows you're invested in what we're doing. Yeah. And usually the best solution, if I can drop my ego, the best solution comes from those challenges. Let's face it, man, especially in big companies, the people closest to the customer, the people usually deepest in the organization, they know the most about the company. They know the most about the flaws of the product or service. They know how we operate probably much more succinctly than anyone at a senior level. So why would you not embrace a challenge from them if they have a recommendation to do things differently, because they see it and live it every day when you don't? So I just really believe challenges are the heart and soul of an evolving team that want to be a great team, and have a little fun while doing it too.
That really resonates with me, because I'm someone that has, very high personal standards, and I've been a coach in different capacities, in sports and in business and lots of different ways. I've been a coach throughout my life, or even when I was in corporate, leading teams, always keeping a very high standard, very high ethics and standards, and everybody, to a bar that's up here in a good way. Mm-hmm. And so I see that by, I agree that it's through those challenges that we're going to grow, that we're going to evolve, that we're all going to become better, that we're going to be open to seeing different viewpoints and learning different things that we might not have thought about. So that begs a question, and probably more specifically this we than any other else, or that we challenge each other. Mm-hmm. Has anyone ever tried to use one of the we's against you? Right. to bring it back towards you and say, oh, well, you're doing this, but that's not, because you can't do that because of this we, or
all the time, but not in the way that you described, though. Okay. One of my favorite examples is so I gave a talk still at Maximus, still with this team that I grew to love. I was giving a speech in front of, I don't know, maybe there were 70 people in the audience, my direct reports who hear me kind of preach this stuff every day, who also were preaching it very consistently. And there was an error in my PowerPoint on the big screen behind. And remember, we 10 is we obsess over details. And I blew it. And I'm up there doing my thing, walking through the slide, not noticing there's a typo. And someone from the crowd, I forget who at this point, they didn't raise their hand. They didn't wait for a pause in my speech to interject. They were like, hey, they pointed out the error on my slide, like it's so abruptly. And I owned it. So it's not as much as, hey, Kyle, you weren't living this, or we caught you not doing this. It was more reinforcing of them when I was out of line, or when I made a mistake. that's a big one for me. Obsessing over details, that example is, but I can't, I think less about correcting me and more about, well, Kyle, we do the right thing, right? So this is the decision that we need to try to solve. Or there's not a day that goes by in another business that I'm fortunate to be a part of where I see someone say, we take action. And I noticed that the team was slacking in X, Y, or Z. So there's always, and that's another kind of hidden beauty of these principles, Rick, is when you get a team, and it doesn't have to be the 10 We's, by the way. I want to be very clear about that. I just think aligning around your leadership principles and getting your team on board with those leadership principles, and even kind of arm wrestling over what are the right set of principles. But I think that is, once you decide what they are and you conspicuously lean into them, and by that I mean they're part of your daily vernacular. Like a good example is we own our mistakes. Man, so many times when someone had some bad news or what they needed to share that they had aired or slipped, they'll lead that conversation with, "Hey, Kyle, we own our mistakes, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" Because we know, as this team knows, when you lead a conversation with any one of these principles, we're talking serious business now, and I'm obligated to react in a way that is consistent with these principles. So it just creates this kind of lexicon inside of the organization that people lean into when times are tough, but it makes it even more powerful, that we can pick up off of one another and how we react and act as it relates to the principles in the tough times. It makes the easy times fun and the tough times a lot more manageable.
Yeah, what comes to mind, Kyle, is, and I forget the leadership guru that said it, may have been Darren Hardy, but it talks about catching people doing things right as opposed to catching them doing wrong. It's catching them doing things right and adhering to those standards, right? Enforcing those standards, like, we take action, right? Like, we're going to do this, and or we obsess over the details. And so that's where it becomes, that's where that everybody's bought in, right? Everybody's bought in, everybody's on board, everybody sees the value, everybody sees the impact that it can have on themselves and the organization. And, it's funny because, I talked about that old school militaristic style of leading, which, is pretty much long and gone for, any good organization. Yeah. But that component of I got your back, you have mine, we're going to support one another. That component that, would come from the military, that is still a very strong component of what you were just describing, right? Of, hey, I'm going to keep you, I'm going to keep you to that high standard, and you're going to keep me to that high standard. And if I slip, you're going to help pick me up, and you're going to, show me what it takes and everything. And so I do love that, that it seems like you took some of the good components that were in some of the things you probably learned along the way and, got rid of the bad.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a line in the book where I say, colleagues become friends, friends become family. And that is, for me, the utopian team environment when, we don't second guess each other's opinions. We don't because we know everyone's being authentic. We know everyone cares about the combined success and not individual accolades. And the beauty of that is everyone gets better in the process. And then that organization that I talked about earlier, I had a leader on the team who at one point had 200-300, a team of 200 or 300, but she was so interested in observing and learning from the incumbent who had the bigger operation, several thousand employees, that she would challenge her to learn more about that role. So when the role became open, she had learned so much because she had been along for the ups and downs and challenges and embracing the challenges of the woman that ran the larger organization. Mm-hmm. So you get this, everyone feeds off of one another. And what it really does, man, if you have a difficult client, or let's say there's a more senior leader in the organization that's tough to deal with, it galvanizes the team. And we were in many ways successful in spite of tough clients, because we were so connected to one another that we were not going to let anybody except ourselves cause any kind of disruption in what we knew we were capable of. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. And if anyone can find that in their career journey, even for the smallest window of time, it will change how you view teams. It will change how you view leadership, and it will certainly view how you change the ability to have an impact that you have, because it's profound if you take it.
Yeah, and it speaks to the value of a team. And luckily I can relate, because I was in that situation in the early mid 2000s early 2000s, where I was part of a team, and we all supported one another. We all pushed each other. Yeah. We all challenged each other to be better. And those, when I talk about the group that I still keep in touch with, it's that group. It's not people in other parts along the way. Yeah. It's people in that group that, we'll still get together and meet when I'm in California and talk to each other, every couple months and stuff like that. And so, yeah, the value of a team, can't be overstated, because it is so important to the whole leadership component. Because like you said, we're all leading one another. It's omnidirectional.
Right on.
Yeah,
Rick, you said something a minute ago that I want to circle back to, and that is catching people doing wrong or catching them making mistakes versus finding. To me, that's a classic definition of a boss. Someone that's just standing there with a notepad, waiting for you to err. And they're going to check that box instead of looking for the great things that you've done to motivate and inspire them to continue to deliver great things. Let's just focus on the mistakes. I just feel like that's such a short-sighted way of getting the most out of people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, to catch them doing right. And I found myself, it's something I had to learn as a parent. When my kids were younger, is to, it's easy to default to the, oh, they're doing that wrong again, they're doing this, and, as opposed to, oh, I love how you did this. And the kind of catching doing right, the impact can be so much greater in that situation for the individual, right? Whether it's team or parent or anything.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And that's probably where you see some of the crossover of the principles, in different examples like you've talked about. For sure. So one question I always like to ask Kyle, as we near towards the end here, is that, whether you're a hero or view yourself as a hero or not, we all have these spark moments in life. And these are when our actions or the actions of another person have a ripple effect that goes far beyond the initial act. They're where, someone said something to you and that totally changed the course, the direction of your life, or you helped someone do something else and that totally did it for them. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing you have a few that you could think of, but share a spark moment in your life or your career where, you had an impact on someone else or they had an impact on you that really changed things for either one of you and, had that ripple effect.
Yeah, you bet. We all have those. I think that the challenge is recognize when it's happening and capitalize on it. Cause I think they happen more often than we see. I think there are, you agree, right? I mean, you've got to be open to them and be willing to run with it when it presents itself. So mine, the first one that comes to mind for me, it starts on a somber note, but I think it will resonate with your audience because of how it turned out. So my mother passed at the age of 63 after less than a year battle with cancer, a really ugly battle with cancer. And I'll never forget, man, one of the last conversations we had, she was approaching the end of her journey. We were in a hospital room. She laid in the hospital bed and she looked up at me and said, it's not supposed to be like this. And out of nowhere, like we weren't in the middle of a conversation. She just reached up, grabbed my hand. She said, it's not supposed to be like this. I go, Mom, what do you mean? She said, I worked my whole life. She was a very hard worker, executive, really, really, really hard worker, greatest work ethic I ever saw. I worked my whole life, but I'm not going to be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. It's not supposed to happen like this. And, at that moment, you try to comfort your mom in that situation. But what it did to me was it lit a fire inside of me to say, if I'm going to work this hard, if I'm going to spend this many hours plugged in to a group of people, into a team, into a company, it's got to be rewarding, fulfilling, and it must matter. I must have an impact because, here's this woman that worked so hard and just felt like it was all for naught. that, she didn't talk about the impact she had as a leader. She just talked about not being able to really enjoy it, which means she was so heads down on making the numbers and delivering a sizable profit for her company. I just feel like if I'm going to do the same, boy, I'm going to have I'm going to do my best to have a huge impact. And it lit a fire that I just cannot be involved in something that doesn't further either a person or a group of people's journey, a company's journey, you name it. I just cannot check in and check out and call it a day. It's got to have meaning. And I believe it started there. That was probably 11, 12 years ago.
That's beautiful, Kyle. Thank you for sharing that. And, sure. I can appreciate that, having lost a parent as well. But more so, I can appreciate the gravity of that as a spark moment, because that impacted you not only then, but it continues to impact you to this day, I can tell. And therefore it continues to impact others. And so that ripple continues, right? That ripple will continue long after. And what a great legacy for your mom, right? That ripple will continue. That spark moment will, ignite so many more things for so many other people. Yeah. So,
I hope so. So.
True definition of a spark moment. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
So I know our audience is going to want to learn more about you, to check out Begin With We. So where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about you and your work, your speaking, everything you're doing?
Yeah, you bet. So we've mentioned it many times, but I'll say it again. The book is Begin With We, 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. All social platforms are the same, at Kyle McDowell Inc. And my website is kylemcdowellinc.com. Find me there as well.
Okay, perfect. We'll put all that in the show notes for everybody, so they'll be able to, we'll put a link to the book and everything. They'll be able to connect with you. So before we go, Kyle, I have the one question that I always ask without fail of every guest. And that's to say that, our goal at iSpark Change is to positively impact 1 billion people in the next few years through our upcoming social impact social media platform. And we can't do that alone. We need the help of social impact leaders like you, who are leading and showing others the way, right? Because many people feel, as I once did, that they're too small to make a difference. Yeah. So I value your thoughts and opinions as a social impact hero. Hopefully I've convinced you by now. You're a social impact hero. So I'm going to ask you to peer into the, our future for iSpark Change, peer into the iSpark Change crystal ball, and tell me, what can the world become if everyone starts believing that they're a leader and that they have an impact on our future?
Well, I have chills because that vision is, can you imagine? What a world. I think it's a place where we are less divided. We recognize the unique talent, skills, attributes, characteristics, however you want to frame it, the diverse perspectives that come from a group of people that genuinely care about advancing something bigger than themselves. And it's lost on so many people. You do not have to lead thousands of people to have an impact. You don't have to have a lot of money to have an impact. Mm-hmm. And it sounds very cliche, but if you can marry something that you're passionate about with the opportunity to make money, that's fantastic. But I am influenced and inspired by people of all walks, man. Entry level people in the business that I run on the side today, to the most powerful executives. It comes from all places, and I just feel like if people recognize the impact you can have on one another, because I said this to someone recently, like, it feels good to help someone. It feels good to advance someone's cause, and it feels good to be helped. So if we can keep that in mind and know that we're all trying to do our best on this rock, right? We all want to have the best experience, the best journey we can have. And if you can help someone in their journey on this rock, you're inherently benefiting from it as well. I just think we got to continue to remind ourselves we're beings that we're tribal, man, and we need to be together and help each other. And the more you do it, the more comes your way. However, I just don't think we think of it that way as often as we should.
Yeah, well said. And I believe that people will continue to evolve in that direction, and we'll continue to see it that way. I mean, what you're sharing and what I believe these are things that have been taught for thousands of years. So hopefully, it'll continue to impact others, as you are with your work. So Kyle, thank you for taking your time to share your heart and wisdom with our audience. You came in, you over-delivered as I expected after our chat in the intro. Your desire to create leaders is very evident. You're filled with passion, humility, and you lead with a heart of service and gratitude, which tells me that you're going to continue to have success in all facets of life. And this is only the beginning of your time as a social impact hero.
Man, what a closing. Thank you very, very much for having me, Rick. It was a blast. And thank you for what you're doing as well. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Kyle. All right, Impact Heroes. It is our stories that connect us all. We loved hearing Kyle's today. Kyle McDowell, you're not only an inspiring and amazing human being, you truly are an iSpark Change social impact hero. We'll see you all next time. Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.